seeing you when you first started out as a fledgling company and now what you've blossomed into, I can't imagine who's doing it any better than this. Let's just say what you're doing is world class. I wouldn't say it if it weren't true. It's just obvious that when you put this type of love and work into something, that it's going to impress even, let's say, a tough customer as myself that grew up around this work. You've put a lot of hard work into it and now it's paid off. I think that anybody that is in league with you is in very good hands.
Some of our accolades, we've been in obviously Forbes, Vogue, GQ. Obviously you know this guy,
Oh yeah.
Mr. Christopher Ellis Days.
Yeah, of course.
This was the Saatchi show here, so the 22 shadow figures were lined up like a bit like an army.
Wow, I wish I'd have seen that.
We had a few goals with this. One is to showcase the bodies of works that in our mind is quite an important bodies of works because it was like the transition piece. 53 were made by Hambleton or original, but we discovered 22 by chance. The goal was to get the other pieces to gravitate towards us, and lo and behold, since that show, we found a bunch more. We now got 30,
Wow.
and we're hoping by next year we're going to find at least, you know, majority more, or if not all, and then redo the show at Saatchi, but with all the family members back together.
I know what to call it. Forbidden City, like the Chinese, you know, all the statues of the soldiers that are all lined up.
Yeah.
Richard Hambleton's Forbidden City, that's exactly what it looks like. And those are the sentries that are standing looking after the streets of New York or wherever he put them. So it, yeah.
Obviously a load of the shadow heads.
That's that one.
I got this one from Mike Melbourne, Frank Chop Shop. I think it's quite cool because it's 2017, one of the last rodeos he ever made.
Also, the way he used this sort of staccato line on it, I've never seen him do exactly that. He was a bug out. He would just experiment with different techniques from day to day, and this is something I've never seen him do something quite like that. I'd like to have that myself. You know,
Beautiful.
It really is.
We're launching this limited edition tonight at the show.
Fantastic.
So it's a run of 75. We've got the rights to distribute 35 of them in the UK. It's a super piece. Have you seen the original of that? Diptech?
No, but it looks like stuff he did in the 80s.
I think this one was from the 90s, but it does look like the 80s.
Yeah.
It's in the documentary.
These, you know, swooshes, there's a few standing shadows or jumpers which have got these kind of swooshes.
Yep.
In actual fact, Johnny has actually got an 80s piece with a very similar design, which we might be brokering a deal for him on that.
Johnny's got a good eye.
You know, the first thing you commented on, the nightlife pieces, because of that double glass, with the light piercing through, it just makes them pop.
Oh, absolutely. And also, you know, it has what you call in Chinese calligraphy or brushwork, it's the flying whites, where he's moving so quickly that you see those streaks of white paper shining through. And when it's backlit like that, you can really see the musicality of how he applied the paint.
And you know they fold into a booklet and a case box?
Yeah, they fold away. They're signed not only on the box that it comes with, but also signed on the booklet and dated 1985.
Oh
They
shit!
fold down all the way, goes into a booklet.
My goodness!
So they're numbered out of the 53, signed there.
Wow!
Numbered, signed there, 1985.
Wow!
Nightlife by Richard Hambleton.
And if you really think about it, these works are a bit like Hambleton's life. 53 were made, then they disappeared for like 20, 30 years. And we've discovered the vast majority now.
Wow.
We're still missing members.
And what's this, Japanese paper or something?
Kimwashi paper.
Huh?
Kimwashi, Japanese Kimwashi.
It is. Strangely, these bits of fiber do the work of his splatters too. They're atomizing the energy around the figure.
How many do you think have been probably destroyed since 85 then? Out of the 53.
Out of 53, how many have you become
30.
aware of?
We've got 30. We're probably thinking maybe 10 to 13 are probably been destroyed, damaged, lost.
It's funny too, because he probably started with this, I'm just guessing, with his shoulder here, and then the head, he realized he didn't have enough space, and then gave it kind of baby splatters, and it doesn't look weird, it looks kind of cool, like it, yeah.
The other thing as well that we didn't know, but on our quest to finding them, is a few years before, he must have had the idea of doing a nightlife series because he'd done 10 nightlife APs. On a much thicker paper. Some of them had booklets, some of them didn't, some of them are a bit sort of damaged and destroyed. We found 4, so one of them is next door. And then in 1985 we decided to do the whole body of works.
Fantastic. You know, we see these so much, and there's value to these is apparent. It's clear as the nose on your face at this point, and that's what he did on the street. So that's how we first became acquainted with him. But the Beautiful series, I think, is something that will live in time. And it's going to take a while for the public to understand that the same guy that did this is equally a chamber of his heart. You know, and it just represented a different state of feelings for him. And I mean, what I like is when it looks almost like just a dirty mirror or something. And then you go, oh, but it can also be seen as a landscape. Because it's all the tumult of like a horse and rider, or that you get from that splatter. It's in that murky, you know, movement of those cloudy forms. And obviously the reference not a lot of people like is the blood in a syringe.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's seeing that day in, day out. It becomes a poetry to him, and maybe he did an hour or two without it. And then finally he gets it, and it's like, it's that feeling. Also, I don't know if this is common knowledge, but he said to me that when he do these, that it's meant to look like the paintings that are in rich people's homes in television.
You said this on my podcast.
On the walls, right?
Yeah, that when in the background, you know, of guy's house, he's talking on the phone, and you see in the background, it's always a painting like that. And maybe I've said this too, so I hate to repeat myself, but I remember when I first brought Vladimir Reutfeld by the studio, he liked one that was kind of similar to this. And he goes, Richard, I really love this one. And Richard, it looked as good as this to my eye. And I said, yeah, it's a great one. And Richard said, not really done with that one. And Vlad was like, look, I'm leaving to Paris today. I'll give you 20,000 right now. And Richard looked at it, and he looked at the money, and he's like, you know, next time you come, I'll save it for you. Let me work on this one more. We came back a week or two later. I came back, and he totally scraped it off and started, I don't know whatever became of that painting, but to me it was at a state it could have been sold, it could have been hung next to a rider or a Turner.
Yeah.
And yet he just wouldn't, he wasn't satisfied until it said exactly, you know, the pitch that he wanted it at.
Perfection.
Yeah, like that's the way, you know, I sometimes get a call about fakes. And that's the way I know a fake, is that it's just dashed off. And my father used to use the comparison of Rolls Royce, that when they paint a Rolls Royce in the factory, apparently sometimes they give it one coat and the guy comes and he goes, okay, it's a Rolls Royce. Sometimes they do it 10 times. And it's the same process. You would think it's the same paint, it's the same material. But Richard was like that. And, you know, like a painting like this, he might have done it in 15 minutes. It doesn't mean it's a 15-minute painting. It means all of his skills were such that he was able to do something very spontaneously, and it came out of him. But believe me, if he didn't capture that gesture, he's going to rip it up and roll out a whole new sheet of paper.
Yeah.
So he was very determined to keep up a certain standard at all times. Even if he needed rent to pay or whatever, there were those moments.
So the art truly came first. It wasn't his wants and needs, it was the art.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's unusual because people will talk about his addiction as like it had him. No, I think he had his addiction, and that was always secondary to his work. You know, he never, there's artists I can think of that had great careers early on, and then discovered a sort of commercial following, and then started to replicate themselves and would just do stuff in their own style. And Richard never did that. I mean, as I come in here and I'm looking at these works I'd never laid eyes on before, I'm like, oh wow, just other themes and variations of ideas I might know, I might be familiar with, but these are wholly new works for me. That's the way he felt at that moment on that day. And Richard, though, he stumbled into certain motifs that he loved and really spoke to his soul. No two rodeo paintings are the same, no two shadows are the same, and no two beautiful paintings are the same. So it's really like a pleasure to walk in here and see your collection. You've really got some gems here too.
So we are at our home, Woodbury House. We, long last, got the gentleman next to me, Nemo LIbrizzi, over from New York. It's been a bit of a challenging time over the last 12, 18 months because of Corona, and we wasn't too sure whether we could either us go over to you or you come over here, but you're finally here, so yeah. Welcome to our second home, Woodbury House.
Thanks for having me.
Like I mentioned earlier, I got introduced to you via Annie Valmorbida, who owns the Richard Hambleton Foundation. And when you came down here and we had some lunch, and when you left, I thought to myself, one day I'm probably going to do business with this man. For the obvious reasons, because you're in the Shadow Man documentary, you obviously know your stuff. Your dad was a great Rick LIbrizzi. And I think you're a good man, and you've got a lot of knowledge about the street art sector, specifically about Hambleton. Mm. So remembering when you first came here to now, how has this space changed?
Well, it was like the mustard seed. At first there was just a few things, and now it's really blossomed into a full-blown cathedral for the man's work. And when you put this much love and care into something, clearly it's not just a business. I mean, hopefully you're also functioning as a business, and it's not a charity after all, but that it gives the right type of feeling to his work, to see it all collected like this and so lovingly put together, that I think it's a great foundation for not only just a business, but a place where a person could come in here and reflect on his life's work. And it's like a perpetual museum show.
When we have clients come in and, over the last few years, certainly since Hambleton's death and certainly since the release of his Shadow Man documentary, which won an award and it's on Amazon, etc., we've been inundated. And in the last few weeks, it's even ramped up more because of the New York Times. There's also a gentleman that I've just interviewed who didn't put a name to his face. He was wearing a mask, and he's been paying homage to Hambleton by replicating the shadow figures. What's your view on that? Because he said to me that he's had 80% people supporting him, but he's had also 20% people that are discouraging him or actually being quite personal, saying that he shouldn't be doing it. What's your view on that?
Well, like Cat Williams said, if you have 10 player haters today, you better work on getting 20 player haters by next year. I think it's a sign that you're doing something. You're supposed to ruffle feathers, first of all. So that's no indicator of someone's doing something wrong. Somebody's always going to hate anybody that begins any type of enterprise. When I first met this gentleman in New York, we were introduced as someone that was carrying on Hambleton's legacy. Of course, I had my doubts, at first, until I met and I started speaking with him. I said, "Oh, he's obsessed." I mean, it's an earnest venture for him. And I think the Times article pointed this out. If it also happened to come into league with a means of promoting Hambleton's work as well, I don't think that was his original impetus in beginning that work. I think he's just an obsessed, it's almost like what do they call it, fan fiction or something, and also I brought two people around that scene. One was Richard's bosom friend, Duncan, who lived with Richard. and another was Al Diaz, that was Basquiat's partner in the Same Old Graffiti and also a street artist.
Who's been on my podcast as well.
Great. So Al, like myself, at first was like, I don't know if this is kosher. And then he met the guy and he was like, yeah, okay. I mean, he's one of us. He's a nut. I mean, because when you did street art, there was no guarantee that anybody would see you, know you, give you money, give you a hug or a kiss. It was more likely the police would arrest you, or you'd be, your stuff would disappear the next day. Also, as far as an homage goes, when I started reflecting on it, I said, well, Richard's work was always very multifaceted. There's an art component, and there's also a social commentary component. And I think that it's fair game to carry on the social commentary. And, like Jay-Z said, the streets is watching. It's, to have these shadowy figures out there on the street, it says something to the passersby, like, hey, mate, you might be going to buy a cashmere sweater, but out there somewhere there's some creepy guy watching everything that you do. And, I think it was the conscience or the dark mind of a dangerous New York at that time. And I think that we're not any better for the fact that all the Hambletons have disappeared off of the streets. And for somebody to put them back in place, even if they're not the exact hand of the artist, I welcome that.
Us as a brand, as I mentioned on my podcast, and I've said this plenty of times to people, we are not from the art market. We found ourselves right place, right time. I got introduced to Andy by complete chance. Mm-hmm. And it was a bit like the stars had aligned, certainly for me. I'm the founder of the brand, and I like to present, I like to sell, I like to do marketing. And the moment I found this narrative of Hambleton, it was so my calling. I mean, I knew straight away. There was like a central feeling I got, which is this is where I'm meant to be. And it's weird because I'm a South London boy, miles away from New York, miles away from Canada where Hambleton was born, but yet there was something that just, the penny dropped with me. And I feel that happens to a lot of people when they come in, because most of our clients at the start were what we call investors. They cared about the bottom line. Mm-hmm. But the moment they watched the Shadow Man documentary, the moment they come to our shows, the moment they got educated, in actual fact, they turned from investors to actually more collectors.
Absolutely.
And they started to really adore and admire and appreciate the different bodies of works by Hambleton. So I think I've asked you this on the podcast. What would you say is your more favourite bodies of works by Hambleton?
Oh, God. I mean, that's like saying, what's your favorite Miles Davis album? I
or
like,
your favorite child?
I like it all.
Yeah.
I like it all. And that experience that you're referring to, it's I think the spirit of Richard's work has chosen certain people to carry on his legacy. And at this point, it is through finding homes for these works in institutions. And I hope he'll forgive me for saying this, but when I met Andy, he was a bit more of a playboy, and he was doing art shows, but all the fashion models would show up. It was more of a blast. And I remember that when he first saw Hambleton's work, it was like kind of a love at first sight experience. And something much more serious came out of Andy from that day, and he's become increasingly more involved with Hambleton's legacy ever since. And I think it's, if Andy can be playful, I think this side of him is the much more serious, sophisticated side. And I think what you're referring to, whether you come from this part of town or that part of town, it's kind of irrelevant. I think that Hambleton's work speaks to us all. He's struck on some universal thing. I mean, we all have a shadow following us around. And I think the fact that speaks to you, and now you've put it on a platform where you're making initiates of other people, I think that's a beautiful work to be engaged in.
So I had Mr. Ken Moss. He's been here a few times. He's been on my podcast. He's a big collector of Hambleton. He's got some fabulous works. I've been really, really powerful, and some unique things. I mean, he's got this gun, which was part of the Mass Murder Scene, which he got Hambleton gifted to him. He's got some incredible stories, and he said something which really made me feel good. He said, you know, there was a few brands in America, in New York, that he said used to lead the way for Hambleton, but he said, in his own words, that in actual fact, you are now the brand that is leading the pack. I'm not here to fish for compliments, but at the same time, it's nice to get that validation. I mean, where do you see us in like the Hambleton market, Woodbury House?
I would tend to agree, but it's not that I go around visiting other platforms or other venues that do, let's say, similar work. But now, seeing you when you first started out as a fledgling company, and now what you've blossomed into, I can't imagine who's doing it any better than this. So, while all comparisons being odious, let's just say what you're doing is world class, and I wouldn't say it if it weren't true. It's just, you know, obvious that when you put this type of love and work into something, that it's going to impress even, let's say, a tough customer as myself that grew up around this work. It's really, you know, you've put a lot of hard work into it, and now it's paid off. And I think that anybody that is in league with you is in very good hands.
We, because we're very open and honest and transparent about the fact that I'm not from the art market originally. I just found myself right place, right time. But just like all our investors stroke collectors, once you start learning about this genre, specifically Hambleton and the affiliates, you fall in love with it. I mean, it's physically impossible not to fall in love with this story. I mean, my dad is going to be in the audience tonight, and he's a typical geezer, you know, he's like double glazer, you know, rough around the edges. And even him, he's actually acquired 2 pieces, which is amazing. It's like testament to the fact that even if you're not from the art market, but you come across this narrative, you can fall in love with it. But the point I was trying to get to is, unlike the gallery model, we never wanted to jump from one thing to the other. Richard Hambleton isn't the flavour of the month for us. This is our life. We've invested not only money into this market, but a lot of time and a lot of passion. And we want to keep on pushing the market, telling the wider world, and making sure that people who don't know about Hambleton find out about him. Banks is a great artist. He just had a record auction, 18.3 million, I think, at Sotheby's, which I was at, which is called Lovers in the Bin. We want to get Hambleton on the same line as Banksy, and I think he can get there.
Oh, easily. I mean, I think that it's either whoever Banksy's working with, or whether it's his own ingenuity, but he's positioned himself very well vis-a-vis the art market. Maybe similar in a way to Damien Hirst, where he's navigated that realm very intelligently on his own or with his camp. Whereas Richard Hambleton in his time did everything on earth to sabotage himself. It's almost a complete opposite. He wasn't jockeying for position in the art world. Maybe a bit in the 80s, let's say. You know, he was young and handsome, and he might have played the scene a bit. But the Hambleton that I knew personally was like an art hermit. And you almost had to force him to sell you something. So I think that's kind of an opposite paradigm to a Banksy or someone like that, who's really made himself kind of the darling of the art world. And can't take anything away from a guy like that. Picasso was like that. Warhol, to a great extent, was like that. But Hambleton was almost contrary to that. Like, you could think like a Van Gogh, let's say. Van Gogh used to curse people out on the street. He was a madman, and, you know, Hambleton was he was a maverick. So if it weren't for like yourself and Andy and, you know, people who have been very careful in collecting his work and putting it in its proper place culturally and also financially, that work would never have gotten done. Because if Richard would have lived to be 200, he never would have gotten his shit together, so to speak.
the main reason why we've got you over here, obviously we're going to be doing some other business as well, but the main reason tonight is number one, to celebrate Richard's life. Today marks the 4th year anniversary of his death. Right. But then also tonight we are at the Hamyard Hotel, which is a world-class hotel, beautiful hotel. There's a 200-man cinema, which we've got 250 people coming to, so we're oversubscribed. We've literally got people who are going to be hanging off the ceilings. Only joking, but there is loads of people coming. And they're there to watch the Shadow Man documentary. They're also to hear a conversation between you and I, a bit like this, Q&A. We are launching our first published book for Hambleton, and also a limited edition, which is a run of 75. So the guests are going to be in for a real treat tonight, because there's quite a few things to talk about. How excited are you about tonight's event?
I mean, it's hard to get me, especially in these kind of post-COVID times. I haven't been traveling at all, and it's hard to get me out of Brooklyn. And I came here with bells on because I really am enthusiastic to join you in celebration of Richard Hambleton. And obviously you've put this together in such a class manner that I feel honored to be part of it.
I can't wait for the for the conversation live, because there's going to be some pretty significant people in the audience. There's obviously collectors and investors, and I think this is the point. Like, if you can't speak to Hambleton because clearly he's passed away, the next best thing is to speak to the people that used to work alongside him. I mean, your dad would have had some incredible stories. You've obviously got some incredible stories. People have commented lots about our conversation on the podcast and other podcasts I've done with Out Diaz and Days and Crash and all these other people, and Mike Melbourne from Frank Chop Shop. But to ask you directly is going to be a real treat for them, and I think they're going to get a lot of value out of it.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Well, look, we've got a few hours until it all kicks off, so this is only a brief conversation, and I hope everyone's enjoying the conversations and the content, and we're looking to really do some great stuff next year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.